Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Tri-University TURAC conference. If this is your first talk, we welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is the talk on onboarding in the virtual world. My name is Angela Valencia. I'm with the University of Arizona, and I will be helping with the session. And we have Nicole Cox and Amber Martin from Arizona State University, and they will be sharing about this really important topic. But before I hand it over to them, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items that you see here on your screen. We do have a technical support line, so I recommend you write it down. If you have any issues during the session, feel free to call this number. This is the ASU IT support line since they're providing the software for the event. So if you have, if you accidentally log off and can't get back in the session, feel free to call that number. The session is being recorded, so it will be available after the event. All sessions, the recording as well as the PowerPoint will be available for later viewing. We do ask that you mute yourself during the presentation and that you save all your questions for the end of the session. There will be a time specific for questions. So at that time, you can unmute yourself or you can post your questions on chat, whichever way you prefer. And if possible, we do ask that you close any other applications or minimize your windows so that you can enjoy the session completely. We have also enabled the closed captioning so that you can see and you can show, hide, or unhide based on your preference. And you can do that with your Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen. And then there will also be a survey at the end of the session. So be on the lookout for it. It will come as a form of a link, so you can click on it and help us with the survey. It only takes like 3 to 5 minutes, and we really appreciate your feedback for future events. So if we can move to the next slide. And here we have a land acknowledgement slide. This is to indicate, each of our 3 state universities, we acknowledge in slightly different ways that we occupy land and territories of Indigenous communities. So we've listed here the specific land acknowledgement statements here for your education and awareness. So with that, I'll now pass it over to Nicole and Amber.
Perfect. Thank you, Angela. So good morning. Thank you guys for joining us. We're very excited about giving this talk. We'll start by introducing ourselves. So my name is Amber Martin, and I'm a grant and contract officer senior in the, and this is a mouthful, Office of Research and Sponsored Projects Administration at Arizona State University. And I'll let Nicole introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Nicole Cox, and I am a grant and contract officer in the same mouthful department that I'm not going to repeat because Amber said it so beautifully.
Thank you. And today we'll be talking about our different experiences with onboarding and training new employees in the virtual world, both from the perspective of a supervisor onboarding someone new and the perspective of a new employee being virtually onboarded. So we'll start with onboarding virtually from the perspective of a supervisor. So Angela, I'm not sure if you can put this link in the chat, but I am posing this question to you guys just to gauge your experience with onboarding. So the question I wanted to present to you guys is, what is the first word you think of when you think of virtually onboarding new employees? So I'll give you guys all a minute to respond either via the link or via text. And while you guys are doing that, I need you to all wish me luck as I go over to, let's see. Yes, very cool. Also, this is my first time doing a word cloud, which I was very excited about. So it's really cool seeing all of you guys put in your responses, and I can relate to every single one of these words. Yes, challenge, stress, friendly, I like that word, that's positive. I like aggravation, it's kind of, I like it. See, change. Yeah, definitely a change from pre-COVID and just from, or when maybe onboarding was more of an in-person situation. Zoom, yes, Zoom, and definitely for my team, also Teams. Adapt. Perfect. And I think that might be it. So I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. Those are all amazing answers. And if you have any other answers or words that you want to talk about, you can add them to the chat. Let's see. Yeah, so the results, you guys saw the results just now. Yeah, so onboarding. I guess I'll get a little bit more into talking about myself. So I've been a grant and contract officer in ASU's Central Research Office for a little over 4 years now. First became a supervisor last year in January when I began supervising a student worker. But starting in October 2022, I began supervising 2 staff management interns. So my entire supervisory experience has been in a virtual environment, basically, where everyone involved is either mostly or entirely working from home. So in a way, I almost feel like there's an advantage to not being or not having experience with onboarding pre-COVID in the standard in-person and office way, if only because I didn't have that experience to compare with my current experience. And also, let me just say, if you see me switching back and forth between screens, I just have a couple of screens going. So yeah. I wanted to say, though, despite what I just said, so I'm going to say the word however, and I'm saying it in all caps, bolded and underlined, that even as someone who's only spent a few days onboarding and training someone new, I can definitely see where the advantages and pitfalls of in-person onboarding and virtual onboarding lie. But over the course of the next few minutes, say few minutes, it's a little bit longer than a few minutes, but it's worth it. I wanted to share what my experience has been, lessons that I've learned, and the tips that I came away with and continue to come away with as a supervisor. So I guess I should start this slide by saying that the entire time I was thinking of what I wanted to discuss for this presentation, the phrase easy breezy, lemon squeezy kept ringing in my head for some reason. So I guess on one hand, it's like this phrase that I love using, but on the other, I think it was a saying that stuck out for me in relation to this topic, because I've had conversations before where the other person thinks that onboarding an employee virtually is made easier by taking away issues you'd only experience if going to the office in person. So things like commuting, parking, and just overall mental drain that showing up in the office can bring. And I should also say, though, as someone who loves, emphasis on loves working remotely and is a huge advocate for it and all the advantages it brings, there really is something that's truly, I would say, unreplaceable about being able to just kind of walk around a cubicle corner and check in on a new employee, or even like being available to that new employee by being only a few steps away. Or even just like building a connection in person with someone that you're only just becoming acquainted with. So I think it can also be easier to hold yourself accountable as a supervisor during the onboarding process when you see your new employee in person and you're able to help them address certain onboarding issues in person. But I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself, and I'll address both a general timeline I like to follow and tips I've tried to abide by while following that timeline. So in the first 2 weeks before a new hire starts, and after confirmation from HR, of course, has been received and the start date has been confirmed with the new hire, one of the biggest things on my to-do list is to prepare for their arrival. So I will say 2 weeks is probably a little bit idealistic, being a little bit generous, but I mean, I guess especially because in the past, a lot of the planning has ended up coming up and coming down to like the last week before a person's start date. But ideally, 2 weeks before the new hire starts, I like to start planning for their arrival. So I'll send like a welcome email to the new employee where I address where we'll meet on the first day, which is usually in front of ASU Centerpoint building, the possible work location and possible schedule, which we talk about definitely more in detail on the first day. I talk about parking for the first day, like any information I can supply about the employee orientation, which at ASU is in person, Zoom, or self-paced. And I'll also provide my contact information in case they have any questions or concerns on their first day. So a lot of that is kind of standard things that you bring up even outside of like a virtual, without having that virtual component, but I think it's still important. And before their first day, I'll also start sending emails to our IT team, which is called RTS, and completing forms that are dedicated to our IT team regarding access the employee will need to things like Microsoft Teams, Research Academy, where the employee will complete training modules as part of their onboarding, distribution lists and Outlook inboxes, Adobe and Zoom. So when their first day arrives, I try to meet up with them in person, and not, I shouldn't say try, I meet up with them in person in our department's designated work building, and I'll schedule a conference room for the first day. So I like to give them a tour in case they'll work there in person or we'll be visiting. And I like to try to introduce them to the assistant vice president and any associate or assistant directors that are tied to our work group if they're in the building on that day. And that's something I'll try to plan ahead for by like reaching out to those directors to see if they'll be in office that day. Because of course they may be at home or working remotely on certain days too. And there are 2 additional components for the first day. So that's a supervisor overview and an access check. So, sorry, during the supervisor overview, I like to discuss certain things with a new employee. So we'll talk about general expectations about the work schedule, the work location. I like to present like an organization chart, which I'll present like a virtual one, but I also like to try to draw on the whiteboard and see how that works out. And it's kind of a little bit of a mess, but I think it's still helpful. And I'll present to the new employee where they are and how our work group and their position fit into the entire organization. I like to give a more in-depth job description and kind of expectations for how their career can grow within our organization. We'll talk about timekeeping and any new hire paperwork and benefits enrollment questions they may have and may have to direct to HR. We'll talk about parking if they decide that they want to work in person at all or want a parking permit. And I'll also talk about what their onboarding training will look like online. And I'll try to present a planned or tentative schedule for the week regarding training. A lot of things we talked about. We also talk about orientation preference and any questions just overall the new hire has throughout the entire overview. And so regarding access, before the first day, I like to schedule a time with our IT department when the new hire and I can go in person to their department to get their new computer set up. So on the first day, we're doing that. We're also making sure the new hire has access to all the programs I mentioned earlier. In addition to Microsoft Suite and any department database online that they may need access to. It's so important that I mention this, but really I feel like there's such a high chance that the new hire won't have access to everything on the first day. And so it's important to remember that that's okay. And I like to treat the first day as more as an informational day than anything else. And I don't expect the new hire to dive headfirst into looking into any systems or doing online training if there's not time. So if the new hire is planning to work from home on the second day, as I would be doing since I work remotely, we will try to make sure that their laptop is set up to be able to use ASU's VPN and connect to the system. If the new hire would like to work in the office the next day, more than likely they may not have building access yet, just because for ASU, that building access will require having both the ASU SUN card and completing fire safety training. So I'll either plan to be around on the second day if I can, or see if there's someone in our work group who'll be around to assist in person if the new hire needs access to our suite or needs anything in person. And then basically the first week is a continuation of the first day. So we're doing access checks. The new hire has questions that I'm still answering, of course. So the second day is usually a day where the focus is on asking and answering questions, continuing to check for access, like I just mentioned. And if possible, I'm introducing the new hire to members of our team, most likely virtually, in a Teams meeting. And I'm adding the new hire to upcoming recurring meetings that our team may have, or upcoming one-off meetings that would be useful for the new hire. And more than likely, those meetings are also virtual. And so before the new hire would have started, I actually like to try to plan meetings and trainings for the new hire. And let me see, I may be on, so just making sure I'm on the right slide. Yeah, so and before the first week, I try to coordinate with colleagues in my team who would be able to cover certain topics with the new hire. So for example, on the new hire second day, I may schedule for them to do like a Teams call with our whole team to meet them. And I'll also schedule a one-on-one meeting with a colleague who can give a more in-depth look into who our team is and the duties that we accomplish. And fun fact, Nicole is usually that team member that I schedule that one-on-one with, like an introduction to our team. And so on the third day, let's say there's like just giving an example, monthly department-wide meeting that I've added to, or added the new hire to, and a weekly team meeting that I've added them to. And then of course, training is still continuing on through this whole process. And I'm just giving examples for like first week and the days. Let's say maybe I dedicate the fourth day to the new hire being trained by certain different colleagues on different sides of a database our department uses to track sponsored funding, which is something I actually do try to do. ASU, we have a system called ERA, which stands for Enterprise Research Administration System. And I may be wrong about that, but it's the system that we use to track like proposals and awards and the entire like life cycle of an award. And so I like to, because there are different modules in that system, I like to have different members of our team like link up with a new hire and have like a Teams meeting, usually about 30 minutes, just to show like the things they need to know about that module. And it kind of brings the whole like system together because I like to have those meetings consecutively throughout like one day, just to see the different sides of one website. And so on that Friday of the first week, I'd scheduled time with one colleague who can give the new hire a tour of a website we use as a resource for our work, which in this case is this website called Research Admin. And also, once again, I think Nicole is sometimes the person to give that tour. And I'll also try to schedule time so that I can give a tour of our group's SharePoint site and any Outlook folders the new hire will need access to. So, sorry, the first week is really about the start of introductions to colleagues and introductions to databases and an introduction to resources. But I'd like to emphasize introduction in that it's not the end of these kinds of meetings, of course, on one hand, and then also I'm not trying to overwhelm the new hire. And so a big thing is I'd consider the new hire's #1 priority that first week just being going through the online required trainings and onboarding modules that all new hires must complete. So these like proposed trainings that I'm mentioning through the first week, if I can't schedule them for the first week, that's fine. It just really depends on the new hire's schedule, timing, and what they're comfortable with and what they, can handle. Yeah, and so the meetings I just mentioned are really just like supplementary in a way to get the new hire's feet wet informationally. And so the first month for me is like a continuation of the first week. So introductions will continue, trainings continue, and job shadowing will start to be incorporated if possible. During that first month, I'd start giving a new hire low-risk tasks that are a good way for them to start becoming acquainted with our systems and the idea of sponsored research. And so I should say, I mentioned first month in this slide, but please also note the so on that I included. There's no like hard and fast stopping point for onboarding, and it's something that can stretch out or does stretch out for months. And so while I'm planning and executing this virtual onboarding, there are a few tips I try to keep in mind. So first and foremost, I make sure that I have a plan and have a way of documenting that plan. So like in my group, in our department, we've created documents that outline onboarding plans for different positions, documenting the expected duties of the position, required trainings, team member facilitated trainings, recommended trainings. You guys are gonna get tired of hearing the word trainings, ongoing trainings, the items the supervisor will need to give an overview of with the employee, different programs for which access is needed, and different individuals and groups the new hire should initially meet during scheduled times. So what you see here, these aren't the templates my team uses, but I wanted to have these here just to show that an onboarding checklist can really come in any format that works best for you. And then along with that, one thing I should mention is that most likely your HR also has onboarding templates that they use. And so when my group was creating onboarding plans, that was something that we took into account, but we also wanted to make it more specific for our group and what we learn and onboard with. So I also like to keep templates for previous emails that I sent for new hires or before new hires started in relation to like access, and even the welcome email I send to the new hire before their start date. For me, it just really helps to be and feel organized in the lead up to a new hire starting. And it kind of, for me, alleviates the stress of onboarding. Of course, having a plan is something you'd probably do anyways in a non-virtual onboarding process. But if some or most of your onboarding will be virtual and not in person, I think it's even more helpful to have some sort of blueprint for the things that you'll need to get set into motion without having that in-person access advantage. But that being said, I think it's equally important to have the flexibility to switch gears if need be. So for instance, maybe a team member of yours won't be able to facilitate a training as previously planned because something has come up. Or maybe you only find this out 5 minutes before the scheduled meeting. So now you're thinking like, oh no, I have this meeting planned for the new hire, and now nothing is gonna go according to plan and the whole schedule's messed up and the day is ruined. Or maybe it's taking longer than expected for the new hire to gain access to a system, which definitely happens all the time. And you were hoping they'd have access to that system so you could start training them on it. It's important just to know and to remember that no matter how much you may have planned for something, things happen and nothing, I don't want to say nothing, but sometimes nothing, turns out 100% as planned or scheduled. And especially with virtual onboarding, sometimes it may be harder to get a hold of people or figure out what is going on when you don't have instant access to someone in the form of just walking over to like the IT department or walking over to someone's office and asking if they can assist. But I will say on the flip side of that, I think being virtual does afford us with so much flexibility in terms of unexpected changes. So like if a schedule change occurs, you always can have a backup plan, like training a new hire on a different topic, or maybe finding a virtual seminar or training that is related or provides very helpful information on a topic related to our field or even related to something that you recently trained them on. So the third thing I wanted to mention was just the importance of being present. And I kept this tip vague because it encompasses many things. So one thing I mean by be present is it's important to be available to the new hire, especially when they won't be able to pop up in your cubicle or office when they have questions. And it's also so important that a new hire feels like they have a supervisor that can reach out to, speak with and ask questions without this fear of being ignored or receiving a response like days or somehow weeks later. So my tip is also like letting the employee know how best to reach you and your preferred method of communication and being available. So like if you say that you'll respond to phone calls, you'd answer the phone. If you say that you respond to Teams messages, you respond to those messages. And if you say you respond fast as an Outlook, you respond in Outlook. And in your everyday interactions with a new hire, I think it's important also to listen and ask questions. So since you don't have the advantage of face-to-face contact on a daily basis, I think it's harder to really foster a connection as quickly virtually. And so with that, I think it's important to not only listen to any questions or concerns the new hire has, but to actively listen, just really ensuring that the new hire can see that they've been heard and that you're fostering that kind of vibe on your team in general. And so though, of course, you're expecting the new hire to be the one to ask all of the questions, but I think it's also important to ask questions as the supervisor, just really showing that the relationship is like a two-way street and not just this one-sided thing. So for instance, I like to gauge how the new hire is feeling about their training and the work that they'll start completing. And I also like to gauge their opinions on different topics and issues that pop up. And I like to involve them in the decision-making process and involve them in a team's process. It's really, I just want to make sure and I want to make the new hire feel like they're not just taking directions, but that they can and do contribute to our department. And so as I'm going through the timelines and trying to follow those 3 overall tips, there are 5 questions that are running through my mind. Or not only 5 questions, I'll say that, but 5 general questions that run through my mind and kind of branch off into smaller questions. So for instance, I'm thinking, will the employee be in person, hybrid, or 100% remote? And depending on the answer, there are things I have to consider like business access, meeting attendance, if I'll ever be able to go into the office to see the employee in person, how they feel about this, etc. And so I'm also wondering, does the employee have what they need to be able to work virtually? So for instance, if they're working remotely, do they need extra monitors? Do they have the supplies they need? They work remotely but need IT help. Does the new hire know how to reach out to IT for assistance? So I'll be the first to admit that I can be a culprit of doing the opposite of this when I don't feel camera ready. And by this, I mean having my camera on in meetings. But I think it's important to have cameras on when meeting with your new hires, especially at the start, just so that you can get like face-to-face contact and get to see each other and see expressions. And it's the closest that you'll get to seeing them in person on a daily basis. I'll also add, because you aren't seeing your new hire around the office and chatting, like, around the cubicle or the water cooler, because that face-to-face time is limited. When you do hop on a call with them during the day, it may be easy for one or both of you to get sidetracked from the issue, want to talk about all the things you normally talk about throughout your day in person. And I personally think it's important to strike a balance between allowing that catch-up time to happen while also ensuring you can get to the agenda at hand. So in my experience, I think it's important to check in daily and eventually weekly, depending on how you and your new hire feel. I like to set up this recurring meeting invite for daily virtual check-ins for the first month, where the new hire can just ask me any questions they have if they haven't already asked them throughout the day. And then they can update me on their progress, and I can also keep them updated and offer feedback as well. And then after a month or whenever they feel comfortable, that daily check-in becomes a weekly one. I like check-ins, or I think check-ins are pretty important, just so that you and your new hire stay connected and the onboarding either continues down the planned path or is updated to accommodate the new hire's needs and abilities. And so another question I'm thinking about is, how can I integrate the employee into the team? So around the third or second day if possible, I like to schedule time for the new hire to meet the team that they'll be a part of via a Teams meeting. I also think it's important that the new hire receive training, not just from me, but from members of the team on various topics, just so that A, I'm not the only person they interact with on a daily basis, B, they don't feel isolated, and C, they can begin fostering a relationship with each team member and can see us all as resources of information. And so with that felt like a very abrupt stop, but I'll pass things over to Nicole.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Amber. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk more about my experience being onboarded remotely, so you can kind of see the other perspective. But I wanted to start by just giving a little bit more background about myself. So I've been in my current role for about 2.5 years. I started in November of 2020. So that was obviously shortly after the beginning of the pandemic, still very much a fully remote environment. And before that, I had been a student worker in person at ASU for about 3 years. So not only was this my first fully remote job, but it was also my first full-time job upon graduating from ASU. So I have kind of that unique experience to provide in terms of not only was I remote or onboarded during the pandemic very early on, but it was also my first time in a full-time job position. And so I think that Amber did an awesome job at providing more of a breakdown of what onboarding looks like from that supervisor's perspective. And in thinking about my perspective, I wanted to touch on three main categories that I found to be extremely helpful in my onboarding situation. And so that was virtual events, remote trainings, and communication strategies. So we'll be going a little bit more depth into each of those. But first, we did want to start with another poll question. And so we'll be using the same Poll Everywhere platform as from Amber's question. She's going to switch us over to see the results again. And this is just a simple yes or no question of, have you been onboarded virtually for a position? So we'll just give everyone a second to input their answers. It's looking so far like it's a little bit of a 50-50 split, kind of going back and forth. We're neck and neck right now. But it's really interesting for me to see if anyone has been onboarded virtually, because that kind of gives me an idea of where you're coming from with this. And so I would also encourage you to use the chat function to, share your experience at all, anything that you really liked that I may or may not touch on, anything that you missed that you think would have been helpful, just to kind of foster a little bit more communication in the chat feature. So with that, I think we can move on to the slides. Awesome. Thank you, Amber. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about in that virtual events category was employee orientation. This is a great way to make sure that your new employee is getting acclimated to the university environment. So for me, this was really important since I could not physically be in person when I was onboarded, since it was so new into the COVID environment. Having that virtual employee orientation was really helpful to make sure I knew everything that I needed to know about benefits, HR tasks that I needed to complete, and also just things that the university offered from a full-time employee perspective. And then another one that I really enjoyed when I was first onboarding was attending wellness sessions. This showed me that my team really prioritized balance between work, life, and wellness. And so it was really nice that my supervisor encouraged me to start attending wellness sessions early on. So for example, some of the ones that I attended was one on how to create an ergonomic at-home work environment, which is something I still use to this day. But our university has a lot of different online wellness sessions that they offer every single week. And so it was really nice to have those made available to me early on as kind of a break from the more formal training and to also start to encounter that work-life balance. And then the final one in the virtual events category was those team meetings and introductions, which was really what we did in place of those more informal water cooler talks that you would get in an office environment. So it was just a way for me to meet with my team through different structures such as meet and greets, which we'll be talking about a little bit later on. So the second category was those remote trainings. And for me personally, I tend to learn well in a more self-paced environment. And so one of the things that was really valuable for me when I was starting out was having access to ASU's Research Academy, which I have a little screenshot of here. But it's basically just an online platform that has preloaded trainings that you can kind of work through at your own pace. This was a really nice way for me to kind of decompress and reflect on what I was learning at my own pace in a more quiet environment, as a break from, more involved team meetings and shadowings and that sort of thing. So this was definitely a valuable thing to have in balance with those more engaging activities. And then next up was meetings where I would work specifically with subject matter experts. So this was really helpful for me in kind of deep diving into specific topics more. This was a place where I would take a lot of notes, but it was also just a way for me to meet with new people who I may not have met otherwise in those first few weeks and take a look into specific topics more deeply. So for example, I would meet with our subject matter expert on the National Institutes of Health to kind of go over how we manage those proposals, and NASA, ASU Foundation, all different types of proposals. But that was a really helpful tool for me to start to dive deeper into my role early on. And then I also did lots of shadowing, which I think was really important. And I'm pretty sure my supervisor from the time is on this call, but one thing that I really enjoyed was that she would just ping me a quick Teams message and say, hey, I'm working on something that I think you might find interesting. Do you kind of want to hop on a call? And I'll share my screen and we can go through how I'm going to do it. And so that was kind of a replacement for that more hands-on learning that you can get more easily in an in-person environment. But it was a great way to just see how things operate day to day, and dive deeper into those day-to-day tasks that I would start to work on as I got more comfortable. And then finally, I really liked having the opportunity to work on specific projects with team members. This was a way to meet new people and learn more about the team structure and different projects that we were working on. So the one that I have on this slide in particular, I worked with one of my colleagues to update our kind of welcome slide deck. And part of that was creating an organization chart for our team. And we chose to use photos of our pets instead of photos of our faces. And so I kind of got to go around to all of my team members in those early weeks and ask them for pictures of their pets. which was a nice way to connect with them about something other than work, but also start to associate people with their roles within the team and get more familiar with everybody. So then the next category that I think was really important for being onboarded virtually was communication strategies. And in particular, I found Microsoft Teams chat to be really helpful. You know, your organization may use Slack or Teams or something other, but just having that always open form of communication through chat for sending a quick message, asking to hop on a quick call, or like I said earlier, my supervisor would chat with me on Teams to see if I was available for shadowing. It really just, it's a nice way to replace that in-person quality of being able to go and stop in at someone's desk to ask a question. So it was really helpful for me to have my team available on chat all the time during work hours to ask questions. And then, of course, attending virtual meetings is really important with cameras on. As Amber said earlier, I know sometimes we all like to have cameras off during meetings, but it was really important for me to kind of start to associate faces with names in those first few weeks, especially since I wasn't in an environment where people would be walking past my desk throughout the day and I could say, oh, that's blah, blah, blah from this team. So it was really helpful to have cameras on to kind of connect with people in a more meaningful way in those early weeks. And then also screen sharing, which was kind of the reverse of the shadowing that I would do with my supervisor. As I started to become more comfortable with certain aspects of the job, I would start to share my screen as my colleagues would kind of watch what I was doing. So it was a way for me to start to get that hands-on in the driver's seat experience while having the help of my coworkers available to me at all times so that they could kind of see what I was doing, how I was thinking through things, and how I was moving about our different systems in those early weeks. So now that I've talked a little bit more about what my experience was personally being onboarded in a remote environment, we wanted to discuss a little bit more generally some activities and tool boarding and are things that we still do with our team to this day. So one of those is wellness discussions on our team huddles. And this is something that I've taken on personally for my team. The idea behind this is that we'll meet bi-weekly to kind of discuss different, things that are happening with the team, different things that we need to talk about. And then I like to have us round table near the end of the call about something non-work related that allows us to just reflect on a wellness topic. So for example, sometimes I'll ask, what are you grateful for? What's something that you're looking forward to in the coming weeks? And it just gives us all a chance to kind of relax and decompress and think about something other than work. And I found it really valuable for connecting with my team because it allows us to kind of learn more about our interests outside of work and also just chat for a little bit in a more casual manner and in a positive minded way throughout the day. And so then along those same lines, I created a wellness resource kind of chapter in our shared team OneNote, which is screenshotted here, where we'll kind of just all go in and share different recommendations for things that we're enjoying, non-work related. So we'll talk about games and shows and podcasts and books and all that kind of stuff. So it's a way for us, even when we're not connecting face-to-face in team meetings, to have that kind of resource for us to chat about things other than work and make sure that we're all connecting with each other. And then we also started implementing monthly lunchtime game sessions. So we'll meet during our lunch break and play different games online, like Jackbox games or something. It's just a really fun way for us to all disconnect from work for an hour, laugh with each other, do silly things with each other, and kind of get to know each other a little bit more in that way. And then, of course, as it's becoming more safe and we've all been becoming more comfortable with it, we have been trying to do more in-person events as well. So, for example, recently we met up to play Mario Kart together. We'll do outdoor picnics when the weather is nice, all those kinds of things. It's a fun way for us to see each other's pets and just connect with each other in a more face-to-face environment.
Hi again. So to go off of what Nicole is talking about, I wanted to add that one of the most important aspects of onboarding, in my opinion, is integrating the new hire into the team. So during COVID, Nicole and I started facilitating these meetings called meet and greets. So essentially, when a person or a new person starts in our team or an adjacent team, we put together a list of groups within our department and adjacent departments. And then we reach out to one member of each team and then try to schedule a team or Zoom video chat within the first couple of months of hire for Nicole and I, along with the new hire and the designated person from each team. So on a side note, I wanted to mention that for the meet and greet scheduled for the new hire and our team or the team that they directly be meeting with, we do try to have the entire team and not just one individual on that call in particular. So yeah, with the meet and greets, we always have it structured in a certain way. So we'll start with an introduction, which Nicole will lead. And she initiates this part of the call where the new hire and the designated team member introduce themselves to each other. And then the team member will talk about their job description and what department they're in and what their department or team does. So Nicole will then open the floor for questions to be asked either by the new hire or the team member. Sometimes Nicole or and I even have questions. And then the last part of the meet and greet is I like to pose like this fun, non-work related icebreaker question. Usually the question is something along the lines of like, what are you doing for this holiday? Or I really like what's something you've watched or read lately that you like to recommend. And so I open that group to the entire group, or open that question to the entire group, including myself, to answer. And then once that icebreaker question is over, the phone call is over. And it's a really fun just portion of the call, just to kind of try to get acquainted with your coworkers on a non-work related way, just making like the meeting a little bit more fun. So these meet and greets have been very helpful, especially because our office has various pre and post award groups. And when you're new to the department, it's very hard to be able to wrap your head around these different groups. Even when you're there for 4 years, sometimes it can be hard to wrap your head around the different groups and who does what. So it's nice to be able to put at least one face to a name. By name, I mean group. And to know that if you have questions or when you see this name pop up in the future, you know who you're talking to and not just a nameless face is on the other side of the computer screen. Wow, I can't believe we've already reached the end of our presentation. Thank you all so much for joining Nicole and I as we showed you our journeys through virtual onboarding. So I guess now we pose the question to all of you guys. If you have any questions or concerns, even suggestions for onboarding, I'm always down to hear anything that anyone has that worked for them that I haven't thought about yet.
So there was a question about the slides. I just wanted to say that they will be available after the event is over, the recording and the slides.
Perfect. Did we have any questions at all in the chat? Cool.
Seems like
Thanks, everyone. Your
enjoyed
comments in the chat are very nice.
Oh, I didn't, let's see.
Yeah, I would agree, Ron. It's something that you just it's very personal to the person. And I've just now started onboarding my first student workers, so I've kind of started to see the flip side of this. And it's true that you really don't learn until you have to do it yourself. But there are definitely some helpful tips to learn along the way.
And we just have a question from Valerie. Let me see. She's saying, what are some of your favorite icebreakers or questions for the meet and greet?
That's a good.
Ooh. I just thinking off the top of my head, some fun ones that we've done that I always like ones that just really facilitate a lot of engagement. I think a fun one that we did was if you were to have a movie made about you, what celebrity do you think would play you? That one's always really fun. We've had some fun ones sharing our favorite family recipes. So that's always nice to kind of get to see what type of food everyone likes to eat. Amber, I don't know if you have any other ones that come to mind.
The first one that you mentioned is a really good one. I feel like there was another one. It was like if your life was like a show or a movie or a genre, or I think genre, like what would it be? Something like that.
Yeah.
And another one that I really like is just asking like what are everyone's favorite places like in the valley, just because I've only lived here for 4 years, so I love like hearing about new places, especially new restaurants that are around town that I have like never heard of before. And that's how I've discovered certain places that I go to now, which is really cool. And I know there's like another question that like brought about a lot of engagement that I can't think of right now, but what's really cool is there are also like so many websites that have like tons of icebreaker questions that give ideas for all of these different topics. And so I have like a few bookmarked for like future times when I want to ask those questions, because my all-time favorite question will always be like what do you like watching or reading, or do you have anything to recommend? But of course, after a certain point of always asking that, like, you're not going to get a new answer. So like Vicky's comment, a show about research administrators would be a tragedy. It's not false. That's true. Maybe I wonder what network it would be on. I love that. Maybe it could be like Abbott Elementary, it just take place in the central research office of each university. That'd be fun. Cool. Does anyone have any other questions? Thank you, Myrna. Very cool. Yeah, Myrna has been a participant in our meet and greets, and always a great one. So I appreciate you. Cool. We made good timing too. It's only 11:58. So I guess if anyone has any questions, they could always reach out to Nicole and I, or even if you like think of things, like I said, that have really worked for you with your onboarding that you'd like to kind of give as a suggestion, because I just love taking suggestions and hearing like what works for everyone. Perfect.
Okay, so if we don't have any more questions, I think we can end the presentation. I did want to remind everyone about the survey. You will receive, after the session is over, after you close your Zoom, you will receive a link. It will come, you will need to copy the link and paste it in your browser because it won't work if you just click on it directly. We would greatly appreciate your feedback. It only takes like 2 to 3 minutes. You will receive a survey for this particular session, and then at the end of the event after Thursday, there will be another survey for the event itself. So if you could complete one or both, we would greatly appreciate it so that we can get better for next year's. And I also want to encourage you to attend the rest of the sessions today. We have several sessions in the afternoon. There's also networking activities, but if you don't have time today, we also have other sessions planned for Thursday. So, there's still time to register, and I hope to see you in other sessions later on. And with that, I think we can close it out for today, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela. And thank you all.
Thank you.